The human population. We are finally here to some very controversial topics. The human population size, affluence, resource consumption, they all are interrelated and they all impact the environment. Probably one of the best examples that most of my students know is China. China is striking with more than 1.3 billion people. That's almost 20% of all humans live in China. Human population and numbers. So by the end of this video, you should be able to explain factors that may potentially limit the carrying capacity of humans on planet Earth. Describe the drivers of human population growth. So what causes us to drive population growth into an exponential growth. And be able to read and interpret an age structure diagram. So although it seems surprising that environmental scientists do not know the human carrying capacity of Earth, or at least they can't agree on it, we are able to discuss the factors that contribute to the carrying capacity of humans on planet Earth and what drives human population growth. We can also look at patterns of the past and how human population growth worked in the past to gain some sort of understanding and insight of what might occur in our future. So scientists do disagree on Earth's carrying capacity, and technically under ideal conditions, all populations grow exponentially, right? It's not just us humans. In most cases, exponential growth stops or slows eventually when an environmental limit like space or food or resources has been reached. So, interestingly enough, every 5 days, the global human population increases by more than 1 million lives. 1.9 million infants are born, and about 800,000 people die. So, the human population was not always growing at this rate. So, if you look at this diagram right here, it shows until about a few hundred years ago that the human population was relatively stable. Deaths and births occurred at roughly about the same equal numbers. And the situation changed about 400 years ago. And that's basically when agriculture output started to increase the amount of food we could produce, and then plumbing, the Institute of Plumbing, so sanitation became to better improve. And so overall better living conditions caused the death rate to fall. But the birth rates have remained relatively high. And so this is the beginning of a period of rapid population growth, and thus has brought us to the current human population of 7.2 billion people on planet Earth. Well, that's at least when this thing was made. We're at 7.7 billion currently. So a theoretical model of food supply and population size. And before we've seen, under ideal conditions, all populations grow exponentially. In most cases, exponential growth slows or stops with environmental, limits are reached. And the limiting factors can be scarcity, resources, food, water, increasing predators, parasites, disease. Limiting factors determine the carrying capacity of that particular habitat. But are human populations constrained by limiting factors? If there's not enough space, don't we just build straight up? Environmental scientists have differing opinions on Earth's carrying capacity. Some scientists believe that we have already outgrown our carrying capacity, or eventually we'll outgrow it. We'll outgrow the available food supply, water, timber, fuel, anything that resources that humans rely on. One of the most first proponents of the notion that humans' population could exceed Earth's carrying capacity was an English clergyman, Professor Thomas Malthus. So you might have learned about him in biology. He's one of the scientists on biology, and he usually just gets a small little paragraph. He basically said that humans, during times of famine, will continue to have more babies. So he figured that out. But anyway, in about 1798, Malthus, he basically observed that population would grow exponentially while even the food supply was not growing at all. So in other words, food supplies, when you increase a fixed amount for each year, humans are still going to completely increase the amount of babies that they had. So this particular scientist concluded that the human population size would eventually succeed food supply, period. And you can see this projection right here. A number of environmental scientists today, they substantiate this claim that Malthus made before even 1800. And they view that humans will have eventually reached carrying capacity, or they have reached carrying capacity. And then after this happens, eventually the population of Earth will decline. Other scientists do not believe that Earth has any sort of fixed carrying capacity for humans, period. We just can't build it high enough, we'll just go to Mars, I guess. They argue that the growing population of humans provides an increasing supply of intellect and leads to increasing amounts of innovation and technology. And humans, they can alter Earth's carrying capacity by just employing or creating the things that they need in very fundamental ways, which can alter our way of life. So, for example, in the past, whenever the food supply seemed small enough to limit human populations, more technology just advanced, increased food supply, and voila, human population would continue to grow. This progression began thousands of years ago. And so now, humans are no longer hunter-gatherers, but we are allowed to hunt and feed large numbers of people due to farming and crop yields, machinery. So most recently, these mechanical harvesting conditions have made farming even more efficient. I mean, these days we don't employ a lot of people to farm our field. Machines actually do it for us. These innovations increase the planet's carrying capacity, as it's shown in this figure right here, 22.2. Many factors drive human population growth. As we know from our study of biological populations and variety of factors that influence their growth, like reproduction, the success of plant and animal species, many of these same factors influence human populations as well. So population size, birth, death, fertility, life expectancy, migration, these are all factors that influence population size in most countries. So in order for us to understand the impact of human population on the environment, we must first understand what drives human population growth in the first place. So the study of human population and population trends is what we call demography, and scientists who study this are called demographers. So by analyzing specific data like changes in population size, fertility, life expectancy, migration, these demographers can offer some sort of insight. And some of them, surprisingly, offer insight into how human populations have changed over time and what we've done or can do to influence that change. So again, the study of human population is demography, and the scientist is a demographer. So the study of plants, botany, and the scientist who studies them, a botanist. There you go. So you can think about the human population as a system, and it's a system of births and immigration as an input, and deaths and emigration as outputs. Essentially, outputs decrease the population size and inputs increase the population size. So what influences, again, these changes in population size? We can view the human population as a system with inputs and outputs, like all biological systems. But when demographers look at a population trend in individual countries, they take into account the inputs and the outputs. Inputs include things like immigration, which is the movement of people into a country or a region from another country or another region. Outputs or decreases include things like death. I don't think we need a definition for that. Or what we call emigration, emigration, which is the movement of people out of the country or the region. So when inputs into the population are greater than outputs, growth rate is positive. Demographers use specific measurements to determine yearly birth and deathly rates. So the crude birth rate, or what we call the CBR, is the number of births per 1,000 individuals per year. So crude death rate is the number of deaths per 1,000 individuals per year. So worldwide, there are about 20 births and 8 deaths per every 1,000 people. We do a factor of migration for the global population because even though people move from place to place, they don't leave planet Earth. All right, so the global population increased by 12 people per 1,000 people. Thus, the rate is expressed as a percentage. So 20 to subtract 8 divided by 10 gives you 1.2%. When we divide the difference of those numbers by 10, we arrive at a percentage because death and birth rates are expressed per 1,000 people. And we'll go over another example of this in class. But let me see if I can help spell it out a little bit. All right, so the global population growth is equal to the CBR minus the CDR divided by 10. National population growth rate, how we calculate that, is we take the crude birth rate plus immigration. And then we subtract that from the crude death rate plus immigration. And once we have those two numbers, we divide it by 10. Doubling time is the number of years it takes for a population to double. So doubling time is in 70 years divided by growth rate. Interesting enough, I know someone's going to ask me, why 70? Okay, if we know the growth rate of a population and assume that the growth rate is constant, we can calculate the number of years it takes for a population to double, which is known as its doubling time. A population grows rapidly. The doubling time gives us a better sense of the magnitude of change that has occurred. So because growth rates may change in future years, we can never really determine a country's doubling time like with absolute certainty. But therefore, we say that the population will double in a certain number of years if the growth rate remains constant. So it's a technicality. So the doubling time can be approximated mathematically. And we call it the rule of 70. So the doubling time in years is 70 divided by growth rate. So let's just say we have a population that's growing at 2%, all right? That is our population growth rate. If I want to figure out the time it'll take for the population to double, then I take 70, I divide that by 2, and I get how many years it's going to take to double. So 70 divided by 2 is 35. A population with a growth rate of 2% will double in 70 years. All right, why 70? And what exactly is the rule of 70? Perhaps you can look that up and we can have that discussion in class. But I'll give you a hint. It's really, since calculus is above the scope of our class, it's really about deriving a number that is compound, a number that continues to compound on itself. You might learn about the rule of 70 in econ too, because time is equal to compound interest and time. And so there's a formula that we can use to derive compounded time. And that's just where we get it. It actually is, I think, more specifically like 69.99 something. But we just use the rule of 70. It's easy to remember. But you might hear it as like the rule of 69 or the irony in growth rate. Anyway, or you might use it as you hear the rule of 72 because some people don't like to use a calculator, so they get 72. But anyway, you can derive this number from a compound formula that shows compounded interest over time, essentially.